Hello. Oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to get into this talk not just about being a voice actor, becoming a voice actor, although that's part of it, but I also wanted to talk about the actual industry itself and sort of where it's come from, where it's going, a little bit of the evolution of the industry as well. But first of all, why am I the person here and why am I talking to you? I've been a voice actor for over 10 years. I've done things like audiobooks, indie games, AAA games, animations, corporate and commercial work as well. So I've had a good amount of experience across the entire industry. I've worked with a lot of coaches in various places. There's nice, lovely quotes by Jennifer Hale down there, who was very kind to do like a video intro for me last year, which was awesome. But yeah, I've worked in a lot of different places in the industry, and I've worked in several different ways as well. So not just remote work, working from home studios, but also being invited to come into studios to do voice acting work on both an indie level and a AAA level as well. So for those different perspectives, I can try and help give some insight with that as well. But what am I going to talk about? What are we going to go in today? I've got a little bit of an introduction about voice acting in video games as an industry and what is going on there. But I also want to talk a little bit about the development of how that's come about and where it's going. And then talk about the career of being a voice actor. How can you become a voice actor? What do you need to do to start making those steps or continue making those steps if you've already started? And then in a conclusion, I'll give you some sort of next steps to take. And I may, if I've got time, because I tend to ramble and talk too much, I may pick on a couple of you if you want to volunteer, and we'll do a couple of things as well, which would be good fun. I'm also doing some one-to-ones later for specific questions and a panel on here with a couple of other voice actors as well, and I'll remind you about that at the end of the talk as well. I'm hoping, if I don't ramble too much, we'll have time for questions at the end, though, so we can kind of cross that bridge when we come to it. I'll do my best. So, the video game industry as a whole. Globally, 3.09 billion active video games players. There's a reason why we have a convention like this in one of the biggest convention centers in the UK. Video games are such a huge business at the moment, and a positive business. There's expected to be even more gamers worldwide. It's becoming a more inclusive industry, a much bigger industry. More money is being poured into it, and more money is being seen in the industry as well, so it's continuing to grow. A study in 2022 showed that among US Gen Z, more time was spent playing video games than watching TV. As TV's been the dominant force in media for such a long, long time, its shifting to video games is huge. And it just shows how much is part of the zeitgeist of today, how much it's used in popular media. Video games are referenced in TV, in major motion pictures, in movies. And in fact, the industry now includes things like composers and actors and writers and directors from the movie industry as well. The blending of those two things are coming across as well with interactive TV, but also video games that are using interactive film medium. And so there's like that sort of dovetailing between the two as well. It's a huge industry. So if you're thinking about getting into an industry where there's a future into it, where there's careers into it, where there's money into it, video games is definitely the right place to be, because it can continuing to evolve and develop, not just for itself, but it's also creating new technologies to work on itself. I mean, without necessarily mentioning the AI in the room, as it were, but also things like VR, AR, and different control mechanisms, the development of controllers for people with physical disabilities, for inclusion in those places as well. You don't see that in a lot of other industries, but you do see it in the video game industry itself. So it's so huge. So voice acting in video games, do all voice games have voice acting? No, they don't. Spoilers. But what types of voice acting in there? And I tend to think about things like who's the protagonist? You know, who is the driving force in this game? You've got games like Half-Life, where the lead character that you play has no voice. So the voice actor isn't needed there, but you need the other voice actors to create the world around them. So you can put yourself in that character's shoes as a silent protagonist. So there needs to be a certain way that those characters talk to you. There needs to be a certain way that those characters create the narrative so that you feel compelled along that journey and don't feel like you're taken out of the immersion. Then you've got named characters, think things like The Last of Us, where you've got Joel and Ellie and compelling characters that you sympathize with, that you empathize with, that you want to know what happens to them, you want to know what happens on their journey and the interactions they have with other people. And then you've got characters where you put yourself in some of their shoes. So you think like Saints Row or something like that, where you've got a character, but you get to choose what they look like. You kind of get to choose a voice. Sometimes you get voice options, which then means you need to get multiple actors acting the same way, and just you're choosing different voice prints as the player. So that creates another interesting scenario as well, where you've got to get the similar kind of performance from each of these lead actors to allow the player to have a choice of different voices to whatever represents them the most or is closest to what they wish it to be. And then you look at things like Baldur's Gate, which has either a custom character, which has voices like that, or you've got the other companions where you can play as those characters and they have their own backstories. So the voice acting needs to happen in multiple different ways. So as a challenge as a developer, you've got to think about all these different permutations and how you're going to get the narrative across. But then as an actor, you need to be cognizant of that, aware of that, so that you can give the performance that is appropriate to that scenario as well. And then you've got to think about things like accents, periods, local colloquialisms. Yes, I did put that in there just so I could say local colloquialisms because I think it's a fun word. But you think about things like if you're in Grand Theft Auto and you bump into someone and they go, "Hey there, partner, that's not cool." It's like, where's that voice come from? This is not immersive. And then you realize that's an actor from Red Dead Redemption. And the same thing is if you're in Red Dead Redemption, you're in a western town, you bump into someone, they go, "Hey, I'm walking here." Wrong game. It's things like that which will take you out of the immersion, right? It'll take you out of that moment. So it needs to be appropriate. You need the right accents. There's a really good focus at the moment, thankfully, on getting authentic accents. As a voice actor, you will mainly get hired for your own voice. Yeah, there are actors who do things like creature voices or accents or specific kinds of voices as well. Thank you. But typically, the majority of actors get paid for their own voice or a version of their own voice. It's like take your voice but make it lower. Take your voice or make it grittier. Take your voice and take it higher. Be more sympathetic. Be upbeat. Be downbeat and depressed. And kind of whatever you want, what they want to create the character that you're going to get cast for. It doesn't mean you can't make a living doing unusual voices, strange voices, or bending your voice to whatever. But the majority of it is going to be your own voice. I've had people come up to me and say, "Oh, I've been told I've got a really nasal voice." I've been told I've got a really nasal voice, or something like that. And it's like, can I work in voice acting? And yeah, of course, because some characters are nasal. Some characters are annoying. It's what they're meant to be there. So kind of whatever your voice print may be, or whatever you sound like, or whatever accent you may have, there is work. And there is characters up there that's going to suit you. I also put a little note down here about strikes in AI, because that is obviously part of the industry as well. There's a lot of discussion going on at the moment. There's a lot of work that SAG-AFTRA and the NAVA are doing in the States in order to try and make sure there is legislation for things like that in the industry going forward. It's a huge topic. I could do an entire talk just about that and probably go on too long, and it would be the most boring talk ever, but it's very relevant. But there's a lot of solidarity. If you look at artists, they are looking for fair legislation around the control of AI. Actors are, writers are, so on and so forth. There's a lot of solidarity going there, and things are going to change in that landscape. If you're going to be involved not just in voice acting, but in the video game industry, it is certainly worth looking into this and making sure you protect yourself. A lot of industries now are trying to make sure that they don't invest too heavily in AI because the landscape is going to change. And if it can't be copyrighted, which is often an issue with things like AI voices, AI writing, AI art, and then how can they monetize their platform? How can they monetize their game? So it's very much a hit topic at the moment. I do think that there is going to be a future that involves AI in some form in the industry, but what it looks like is kind of going to be down to what people fight for and what people want, which is things like fair pay, fair representation, and looking after each other. But yes, certainly read up on that and look after yourselves and be careful. But yeah, the NAVA, National Association of Voice Actors, they're doing really good work on the moment and trying to put forward positive legislation. And SAG-AFTRA are doing a lot of things like the strikes at the moment, and you'll see in Hollywood, the people who aren't even at risk, things like main Hollywood actors, like people at the top where their roles aren't going to be stolen by AI, it's going to be everybody at the bottom, they're still ones on the picket lines. They're still out there fighting for people's rights. I know a whole bunch of actors who aren't even in the union, still going out there and picketing in solidarity. It tells you a lot about what's going on there. Anyway, I'll move on to the actual crux of the talk. Development. So I put here, it's a door that swings both ways in health, advocacy, and communication. Communication is a huge part of this cornerstone. If you're an actor, you need to be able to communicate with the director and with the writer in order to understand the character. The more you understand the character, the more you can give an authentic performance and a performance that is true to the character. And if you are a director or a writer who needs to communicate with the voice actor, the same needs to happen as well. But also, the project manager needs to communicate with those guys in order to know what's going on, to have a clear vision for the project. And everything in between, the studio engineer needs to know where to make the cuts, how to put those lines together, how to create a cohesive character and performance and position in that video game. So communication is huge. Communication isn't just about the character and developing that, but things like health and advocacy as well. If you're doing screaming, like if you're doing shouts or commands like grenade, sniper, that kind of stuff. This is not me acting, this is me talking about a video game. That's not indicative of my quality, just saying. But people like Gary Oldman and Kiefer Sutherland were in Call of Duty, and there was a story they did on a talk show where they met up with each other in the hallway, and it's like, oh, how are you finding it? And it's like, great. But it's a lot more shouting than I imagined, and my voice kind of hurts. And they were saying about how it was hours and hours of them doing those kind of commands over gunfire and explosions, so they're having to shout at the top of their lungs and scream over and over and over again. And if you don't stand up for yourself, you'll do yourself injury. You can injure your voice, just like you can pull a muscle, twist a muscle, break an arm. You can do the same thing with your voice. So if you are screaming for hours and hours on end, if it even's close to starting to hurt, you need to stop. You need to take a break. You need to look after it. Your voice is your instrument. Just as if you were a concert pianist or a saxophone player, you need to look after the instrument. You need to care for it, give it aftercare. And that will look like things like hydrating. And I don't just mean gulping a pint of water before you get into the booth, but I mean regular hydration. And making sure that you're hydrated from the day before, the week before, and so on. It does mean you nip to the loo a little bit more often, but to have a good voice, it's worth it, I promise. But that kind of general health and care, giving yourself rest days, giving yourself time to recover, making sure that you stand up for yourself in a recording session and say, hey, can we just take a few moments break just because I want to look after my voice? It means that I can continue acting for you today or tomorrow or for the next job. It's important. And so health, advocacy, communication. Health also looks like mental health. Mental health is something that isn't talked about enough, and in an industry where I am essentially in a padded room talking to myself most of the time, it helps to build community, it helps to have people to talk to, it helps to have a support system, people to lift you up, people who believe in you, people who can encourage you on a journey where, especially in acting, you are quite often dealing with unpacking your own emotions and the emotions of other characters, and being able to do that safely with like good conscience and good morals and looking after yourself and feeling good about yourself, that's not always easy, and it's not a straight line. So much so that mental health is not a straight line in any walk of life, and something that I advocate people looking after themselves and looking after each other for as well. So evolution, video games. This is for a game called Warplanes. I did some voiceover for their advertisements. It was a really fun job. But the evolution of this, the reason I put this one up is that I didn't actually do any voice acting in the gameplay, but it was for the trailers for the games and cutscenes. So that's a way that things like Kickstarter videos now need voiceovers, and that's a niche in the industry that's still working in the video game industry with voiceovers, but not in the way that most people think about it. Kickstarter videos, things like you've got video games awards ceremonies, where it's like, coming up, here's a world premiere, and that kind of stuff. It's, everybody's heard that voice. But voice acting has evolved hugely. Voices used to come from one place with video games. Does anybody know where it used to come from? Any hands at all? Any guesses? Hang on a sec. I can't hear you because it's very noisy around here.
Film industry?
The film industry, good guess. But no, they didn't have budgets back in the day. Video games back in the day was low budget. It was indie, it was tiny. It was the developers who gave the voices. Those early voices of video games, it's just like, oh, Brian, do you want to do this one? Oh, yeah, mate, I'll do this one, no problems. I don't know why I called him Brian. It's the first name that came to my head. If anybody's called Brian, I'm sorry. But it started there. There wasn't actors being involved in this. It was just whoever was free, or they just find somebody who'd be up for doing it, because, you know, they were just trying stuff out. You know, it was the Wild West back then. Then they did get local actors and local theater folk and things like that, and in some early games you can really tell. And then, yes, it got to the point where you had actors, but at that point, still, voice acting wasn't an industry. It was just actors that they were getting who were just like, yeah, I'll come in the booth, do some voices. And it took a while for that kind of stuff to get going, to the point where you started to get Hollywood actors. I remember a game I played before Windows existed called Lands of Lore, The Throne of Chaos. It's like a medieval RPG point-and-click thing. It's like a dungeon crawler. And I was my very young 7-year-old mind was blown, because on the back of the CD case was Patrick Stewart, and I was watching loads of Star Trek The Next Generation going, what's Jean-Luc Picard doing in this game? My voice probably wasn't that high when I was a kid, but, you know, for the illustration, it's there. And it blew my mind, and suddenly, you know, showed me that there was this industry. And now, these days, you've got, like, Kiefer Sutherland being, you know, no, he's Venom Snake. There you go. I was trying to think of which snake it was. There's many snakes in Metal Gear Solid if you haven't played them. They're code words. Sidetrack. But yeah, the evolution of the industry now is you've got Hollywood actors, you've got voice actors who are known as being voice actors, and people like Nolan North and Troy Baker, everybody's just like, I know that person. But you don't know them from film or TV, although they've done some of that as well. You know them because they've voiced a bajillion video game characters, and you're just like, oh yeah, I know them. So that's a huge evolution of the industry. And actually, if you think about it, over time, a very short period of time. The movie industry has taken much longer to become household names and superstars. The video games have done it in a very short amount of time because of the development of it. So where does this fit in the development of video games? Where do we fit as voice actors, or if you're not a voice actor, where do you fit? You've got casting. You've got people who are finding the right voice actors for the roles that they're given. They need to know what's going on in the project. They need to know what voices are present in this project, and they need to be able to find the actors that are going to fit that role, going to embody that character. You've got directors who are going to get the best performance out of the talent, who are going to try and nail down that one take that they actually use in the video game. And they need to get the emotion across. They need to get the moment across. And the director and the writers and the casting directors, they all need to know what those emotions are. They need to know what those characters' motivations are. They need to know what's going on in the world, especially when you're looking at something that's really detailed. You can certainly look for generic voices for small roles, maybe, and things like the GTA bumping character going, hey, I'm walking here, it's a disgruntled person. We can find loads of those. But if you're looking for someone who's got a lot more of that emotional nuance, sometimes hard to find. In the booth, or are they in a booth? Are they in a homemade booth? Are they doing it from home? How are you communicating with them? Are you sending an email to them with a PDF of all the lines they need to do? Or are you directing them? Are you on a video call with them? Are you inviting them into the studio? Are you working with them there? And then in the industry now, we've got things like mocap and PCAP. PCAP, performance capture, mocap, motion capture, where you see people in the Zentai suits with lots of bubbles all over them so you can track their movements and things like that. The industry's moving on even further from that now. You can get the Unreal Engine on your phone and hold it up to your face, and it'll track all your facial movements, create a facial grid map of what you're doing, so you can capture that performance and overlay it onto a completely different face and watch them do all the acting you're doing and going, this is really weird. I love it, it's really fun. But it's like being aware of these parts of the industry. Being aware of all the moving parts of this means that when you get invited to do these roles, when you're doing these roles in person, you know what you're supposed to be doing. You know what you're going to be doing, and you know you're going to be able to do it in such a way that it helps them do their jobs. How am I doing for time? I'm doing all right. So, can I voice act as a career? Is this something that I could do myself? Is this something that any of you want to do? And show of hands, anybody's interested in being a voice actor or a voice actor already? It's quite a lot of hands. I like to see this. This is great. So yes, obviously, the answer is you can voice act as a career. So I got a bunch of things across here about the job itself. Voice acting, I say on here, it's the fun part. It is definitely the fun part. When people think about voice acting, they think about being in front of the microphone, in a booth or not in a booth. Sorry, I saw you leaning. I'm in the way. So the fun part is often what people think about the voice acting. They think about being in the booth or being in front of the microphone, being the character, doing the roles, being given direction and going, this is it. And it is it. It's the best feeling in the world. I would argue it's the best job in the world. I absolutely love it. For me, it started out as a hobby that turned into a job, that turned into a career, and as now a full-blown obsession, and I love it. But it's not the whole job. It's a small part of the job, is doing the voice acting. Many people say that auditioning is the job, because when you send off an audition, you're doing the acting, you're creating the character, you're being the character, you're doing all the work of doing the actual fun part, but you're doing it as an audition. And you're not turning up, well, at least I hope you're not turning up as an actor and going, I'm the best actor, when really you should be going, this is the best version of this character that you've asked for that I can possibly give you. It's either right for your project or it's not, and that's nothing to do with me. That's all down to the casting director to make that choice. All we do as actors is give them the best version of that character and the best interpretation of that character that we can give them, and it's up to them to decide whether it's the right one or not. Auditioning is the job because you spend a lot of time auditioning, and then you spend some time doing the actual voice acting itself, because you don't get picked for every job. But every time you audition, you grow. You're practicing. You're actually doing the work. And therefore, you're not losing out by auditioning and not getting hired. You're still doing the job and doing the practice. I put miscellaneous on here because I said about fueling yourself as a mental health task, because if you're a voice actor or actor in general who has not gone out and experienced much of life, then what do you have to draw on in order to give over those emotional experiences? You still need to live. You need to spread your wings. I encourage people who are getting into voice acting to do things like, obviously things like learning, doing classes, doing things like singing lessons for vocal control. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to become a great singer. That's not the important part, but it's all about experience. But I also say go out there, go hiking, take up hobbies, go traveling. Travel's a huge thing, because the more you experience of life, the more you can empathize with other people, the more that you can put yourself in those characters' shoes. The more empathy and knowledge you can get about general life and people in walks of life. I people watch all the time whenever I'm doing stuff at the moment. If I'm in the airport, if I'm on public transport, I'm constantly going, what is this person doing? What is that person doing? What is their backstory? And coming up with wild backstory. Oh yeah, they've got curly hair, curly brown hair. Oh, I wonder if they're secretly a chef, and that chef also has a wife, but they also have a mistress, and just like the imagination runs wild. But it means that when I'm in the booth and they're giving me a character and not really telling me what's going on with that character, I can come up with something like that in order to put myself in the shoes of a real person, of a character, because the delivery that you'll give of lines will be different if they're stressed, if they're a good person, if they're an immoral person, if they're tired, if they're angry, if they're about to be, if they're about to retire, or if they're saving up for a mortgage and stuff. All of these little back things, sometimes even in a single line, will change the way that you deliver that line. Saying, hey, Bob, how's it going? Instead of going, hey, Bob, how's it going? Completely different tonally. And it tells you something about the character. Things like even just the sigh, if I kept the rest of it the same, but just had the, it tells you something. And that's not on the script. It's not on the page. It's not what they've told you to do, but if it's there, you learn something. And so the more you know about that character, the more that you can put that into your performance. That's a long tangent on MISC, sorry. And then advertising. You are running a small business. You're a small business owner. It doesn't sound like it because, oh, you're a voice actor. That's not a business. It's like, yes, it is. You've got to advertise. You've got to put yourself out there. You've got to do things like this, do talks, go to conventions. When I'm not actually talking on the stage, I'll be rubbing elbows with indie developers and giving out business cards to see if I can get more work. I'll be talking to other voice actors. I'll be talking to industry folks and hanging out with them. I'll be going up and meeting some of the meet and greets and stuff like that, trying to sort of see if they're like-minded and if we get along, and in which case I want to work with them, because that's part of the fun of this job, is getting to work with awesome people. And it's also about things like using social media to put yourself out there, having profiles, having a good website, having a good, effectively, if you were selling a product, a shop front that sells what you do to other people. Because if you don't do that, if you don't put yourself out there, how are they going to know that you're a good actor? How are they going to know what your capabilities are? How are they going to know what you can do? So, as you can imagine, that takes up a large part of what you're doing as a job. Like, I do spend time in the booth almost every day. I do take some days off. My therapist said I should take more days off, but well, I'm working on it. But yeah, you do spend the time in the booth doing the acting and the auditioning, but you also got to spend time doing the admin as well. You got to do your own taxes if you're self-employed. It's just, I hate, but it's a necessary evil. So yeah, the job is much bigger. It's much bigger, and it's education as well. It's not an industry where you learn how to become an actor and go, great, I'm an actor now, I can just do the job. You continually learn. You continually grow. Actors don't get good and then go stationary. They continually learn and they continue to improve in order to increase their craft, in order to increase their ability as an actor. So practice. Practice is what you got to do to be an actor, a voice actor. I say actor, voice actor, because they're the same thing. A voice actor is an actor, just with different slight skill sets, the same way as a theater actor is an actor. The actual act of acting is something that you can do a little bit on natural ability, but you can also, you're going to need to be taught it. You're always going to reach that certain level where you can reach, and then it's like, right, I need outside influence here, I need more knowledge here, and whether that be through coaching, classes, peer work, anything like that, any place you can get knowledge from, get that knowledge every single time you get the chance to. Things like workout groups, AmDram, amateur dramatics, local theater. Anytime you can get together with other peers in a safe atmosphere where you can make mistakes, where you can try out voices, where you can have a play with different characters and try and grow as an actor. So valuable. I say media on here, things like radio, podcasts, audio drama, audiobooks. Those are places where you can listen to other people giving these crafts, try and replicate what they're doing, listening to that craft, and being aware of the industry by listening to stuff like that, so that when you come to want to be in those industries, you know what some of the terminology is when they're asking for certain things. If somebody asks you for efforts in video games, you're going to know that means you might be able to hit other people. You know they're not vocalizations, so it might be, that kind of stuff, that's efforts. Then you've got DIY. Sometimes, especially during the pandemic, there wasn't a lot of jobs out there. Sometimes there were loads, sometimes there were none. So make your own project. Why not? Get together with a few like-minded friends. If you're all thinking about doing voice acting and struggling to find work, make some. Come up with a podcast. Come up with an audio drama. If you know somebody who's doing video games, say, hey, do you want voices for the video games? You've got to put yourself out there and speculate. Things like making of, DVDs, documentaries, making of, that kind of stuff. Alan Wake 2 is coming out soon. I'm very excited about that. But Alan Wake 1 has a mode where you can play through the entire game with pop-up windows of the developers, the art team, the voice acting team, where you can see what was happening in the making of the game whilst you're replaying the game. Stuff like that is so useful. Any Disney DVDs that you have knocking around your house, you can have DVD extras on those, and they show about the voice actors in the booth. That's so valuable to see them vocalizing. What do they do to do it? Do they change their physicality to create this monstrous beast? Do they stand on tiptoes to get the high voices? It's like all those different physicalities can help you bring out some of those voices. Self-led, get in front of the microphone every day. If you're starting to become a voice actor, if you want to get in good practice, try and do it every day. Even if it's just for 5 minutes, it just gets you used to doing that. It's taking away a barrier, a mental barrier, when you come to doing the work of going, I'm scared and I don't know if I can do this. Instead, you're going, I've done this every day. This is normal. It's something like, I think they say it's like 10,000 hours to become a master by practicing 10,000 hours. It's not true. I'm not going to say doing just acting for 10,000 hours is suddenly going to make you a master of acting. Not the truth. But it'll certainly help. The more practice you get, the better you get. One thing I will say is usually between 20 and 40 days, they say by doing something, it makes it a habit. So if you can make getting in front of the microphone a habit, that's really important, because then it becomes normalized. It becomes like, oh yeah, I do this. Also doing things like having a setup that you don't have to put up and put down every day. Because again, that's another mental barrier. It's like, oh, I've got to get the stuff out, and I've got to do it, and I'm kind of tired today. Work was really tough. I don't know if I can do it. Take that away. Leave it there. Have it set up so that when you get in, you're like, oh, I'm a bit tired, but it's right there. Let's do this. We can do this. And like having that moment. A lot of people ask me when I was doing a 9-to-5 job and doing voice acting at the same time, how I was able to do that. And I would joke that it would be, well, I don't sleep very much. But the truth was I had to give up things. I had to do less socializing. I had to go out a lot less. I had to give up a lot of like activities and hobbies and things like that to focus on what I was doing and able to do both at the same time. And when I eventually made the transition from going full-time employment and voice acting to voice acting as my full-time employment, it was a huge shift, but suddenly I got all that time back, because all the time I was doing that 9-to-5 suddenly wasn't there, and being self-employed is the best thing in the world because I get to dictate my own hours. But yeah, it takes time to put that into practice. It takes time in order to build that kind of career. Another thing is broadcast. Put yourself out there. You know, don't be afraid to say, hey, I'm doing voice acting. You don't need to have a paid job in voice acting to say you're a voice actor. If you are acting and you are using your voice, you're a voice actor. What a lot of you are doing right here today is sitting and watching a talk on voice acting. There are loads of people sat at home on their sofas going, oh yeah, I could be a voice actor, and they do nothing about it. The fact that you're even willing to do this shows that you have some drive, so you have some ambition, so you want to do something. And if you want to do something about it, and you are doing something about it, then you're on that journey. And being on that journey means you are part of that fraternity. You're part of that group. You are a voice actor. So this is where I get to pick on people, and I love it. So there's a couple of things I've got here, a couple of exercises. I'm only going to do the tongue twisters with you guys, but I'll explain the emphasis one just as a practice term here. So there's a sentence here of, I never said she stole my money. This is a really good one to practice emphasis and changing the meaning of a sentence. So you can put emphasis on each words of, I never said she stole my money, and it completely changes what the sentence means. So it's, I never said she stole my money. Could have been somebody else who said it. You know, it wasn't me who said it. I never said she stole my money. Maybe I gave it to her. You know, I never said she stole my money. Maybe it was in an email. Maybe it was in a letter that I sent in the post. Nobody does that these days. But you can see how you can change. Never said she stole my money. Could have been somebody else. I never said she stole my money. Well, maybe she stole my heart. Ah. But you can see how, like, the emphasis changing for all of these. Never said she stole my money. It was somebody else's money. All I'm doing is changing the emphasis on one word in this sentence, and it changes the meaning of it. And that's the power of, like, when you're looking into a script. It's like, how do I interpret this script? How do I read this script? How do I put the right emphasis in the right places in order to get the message across, in order to get what the crux of what the character wants to get in that very moment? And it's the same thing with, she told him that she loved him. Put the word only in between the words in this sentence. She only told him that she loved him. She told him that only she loved him. She told him that she loved only him. Ba, 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 ba. But again, it's just to practice emphasis. It's to practice sentence structure. It's to practice ways of doing things differently in order to switch up your audition or your performance, in order to change the way you're acting. So by using practice terms like this, it means that you can just further develop what you're doing. And then tongue twisters. Tongue twisters are great for warm-ups. Please do warm-ups before you're doing any voice acting, doing big things. Yes, doing things like vocal scales, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, that kind of stuff. Actually really useful, just warms you up. It's very safe stuff. You're not like putting grit into it or anything like that, or vocal fry and stuff, which can burn out your voice. Just do it clean, do it nice, do lots of, this is the most annoying one. A friend of mine used to do this all the time. It's so annoying. So don't do it in front of your friends and relatives. It's annoying. But do it behind closed doors, and it's really good for you. Really good for head voice, too. But tongue twisters. Does anybody want to volunteer to do a tongue twister? There's a hand up straight away. Yeah, get in. So yeah, do you want to try the top one or the bottom one?
Try the top one.
Top one. Okay, go for it.
The 33 thieves thought that they thrilled the throne throughout Thursday.
Yeah, give him a hand. Perfect. Great job. Yeah, hard one. The TH, real hard. Some people struggle with different parts of sentence and word noises. The TH one can really trip up some people. They get a little bit stuck on. If you think about things like speech impediments, sometimes TH is in there and it's a little bit difficult. So working on stuff like this, finding tongue twisters with really difficult things as part of it. The S noise can sometimes be really hypersibilant with some people or really understated with other people. And if that's happening with your voice, it's something that you can work on by doing things like tongue twisters and getting that practice in. Can I have another hand up for the other tongue twister straight to the front?
Brisk, brave brigadiers brandish broad white blades, blunderbusses, and bludgeons, balancing them badly.
100%! Yeah! Thank you very much. Yeah, again, the B's. B's are really good, and P's are really good, specifically for exactly what you can hear here. B, P, plosives. Plosives are hell. It's why we use pop shields in voice acting often in front of the microphone to catch some of that air exhale. Sometimes you need to move the microphone off to the side slightly. You can still hear me nice and clearly, but la 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 la. Little changes, but very different. So you've got to be careful about plosives and things like that as well. So again, tongue twisters, you can practice these things in your home. You can record them, listen back to them. And all you're doing whilst you're doing that is also getting used to your own voice through a recorded medium. When we hear our own voice in the room, we're hearing it bouncing off other places, or from speakers in this case, but we're hearing it bouncing off the rooms, but we're also hearing the resonance inside our own skulls. Weird thought to have, but it's true. The reason Mozart could still play the piano even when he went deaf is he held a pencil in between his teeth and rested it against the piano so he could feel the resonance through his jawbone to his ear and still hear to compose his last few symphonies. And it's the same thing when you're doing voice acting, is you're hearing that resonance, you're hearing all of that, and that's why initially a lot of voice actors, when they first hear their voice through headphones or speakers, they're like, that sounds weird, it doesn't sound like me. However, the human brain is a beautiful and wonderful thing, and it adjusts what you're hearing the same way that we have eyesight and we have the optic nerve that goes outside the back of our eye actually creates a blind spot. There's no light receptors there. We have 2 blind spots on our eyes, but the brain is very clever and it fills in each of those blind spots with information from the other eye in our brains. Awesome! It does the same thing with voices. What we hear through the speaker when we're listening back, or headphones when we're listening back to our own voice acting, is what the client will hear. And we need to know how to control and make it so the client hears what we want them to hear as an actor. So the more you listen to your own voice, the more awareness you'll have of your own voice. And the more awareness you have, the more control you'll have of your own voice as well. So what do we need to become voice actors? Obviously, microphones. I put XLR mics. I put USB mics, but I did put an asterisk by it. USB mics have come a huge way in the industry. I would say that a lot of USB microphones aren't competitive. You'll see a lot of things like Blue Yetis. Great to start out with, to practice with, really cool. But you're very quickly going to meet a point in the industry where they're like, this is not high enough quality audio. However, companies like Rode and Shure, and there's one called Waves by Elgato as well, have created really good USB microphones recently with really competitive circuits. I still would say that you're not going to get work in a AAA game using a USB mic. But you can work really effectively in the indie industry, in things like corporate commercial work. TV work often actually will accept things like that as well. So it's a great place to start if you're really working on a budget. You can get good USB microphones for about 100, 200 quid, which is really good. However, really you want to get an XLR microphone, an audio interface in order to get the audio interface, process the audio, turning it from an analog into a digital signal outside of your computer. If you're just plugging it straight into the computer, it's going to be a lot more complex. Again, I could do a whole talk about just this, but I'm trying to skim through. I've also put in here, what is a DAW, a digital audio workspace? This is the software that you're using to process the digital audio that you've then created. So I use Adobe Audition because I have the Adobe suite. I also do film editing. I also do short films. I also do things like flyers because I do music. I'm in a band. So having the full Adobe suite works for me. However, some people aren't going to be doing all of those things, and paying for the full Adobe suite it's kind of expensive, isn't going to be a good option for some people. So you've got things like free options like Audacity. If you're using Mac, you've got things like GarageBand, and you can do a lot of indie work with stuff like that. But you've also got things like Reaper, you've got Logic, you've got Pro Tools, and there are a whole bunch of DAWs out there that you can use. And thankfully, there are also lots of things like YouTube videos on how to use them effectively in order to get educated on that as well. Also, a lot of audio interfaces and microphones, especially when there are bundles online, come with their own proprietary DAW as well. So if you're looking to upgrade your tech or buy tech to get started, sometimes worth looking at that and seeing if you get along with that as well. But one thing I added down here as well, number 3, is the room. Because your microphone, if it's absolutely amazing quality, your audio interface, the DAW that you're using, your editing skills are all great, and then you plonk your microphone down on the kitchen table in the most reflective room in the house, it's gonna sound like garbage. You gotta make sure that you are in a room just that is treated really well, just as much as getting a good microphone. There's no point in spending loads and loads of money on a microphone if you're gonna spend nothing on the room that it's in. That's why we have things like soundproofing. There's great things on, there's a site called Instructables, which show you how to make your own homemade booths, either with doing things like, I've seen people doing things like railings around the top of the room, and then they put sound blankets in order to do that, in order to create a little isolation. Some people use cupboards. Some people just create a corner of the room. Some people actually build custom booths and things like that. Lots of ways to do it. Obviously, once you get to the point where you're earning money, after you've grinded through some indie projects and gotten somewhere with it, then you can look at investing money into proper sound panels or having a custom booth. But it's a lot of money. So to start out with, I know when I first started out, I got like a 3-panel drying rack for towels and things like that, and I put duvets over that in order to put that behind me in order to create a little barrier back then. And then I got pillows around the microphone and things like that, and it worked to start with. I've seen who was it? Liev Schreiber, amazing actor, very underused and very underseen. He's done a whole bunch of voice acting work in hotel rooms whilst he's been doing film sets. So he'll work on the film set in the day, TV sets and things like that, and then I'll go back to the hotel room and he's got this little pillow fort and he's doing voice acting into microphones for projects as well. And if somebody of the level of Hollywood and TV doing things like that is effective, then it can be for us too. But where to work? Can I work from home? Can I do remote work? Yes, you can. I do mostly remote work. I have a home studio set up. I've got what would be a kid's bedroom in my house that I've completely converted into an audio studio, sound paneled all the walls, and I got my little desk that goes from sitting to standing. So if I'm narrating an audiobook, I can sit and not wear out my legs. But if I'm doing a performance, I can stand and give all that energy and stuff. But I also get called into booths in studios. So I go to places like London and Bristol and Cardiff, and I'll go into studios and I'll perform. Sometimes I get directed over webcam or through voice chat, things like Zoom and all of that kind of stuff. And sometimes it'll be in person. There'll be somebody in the booth giving me directions. There are all options. The more that you can do, obviously the more work there is a pool of you to be able to do. But I do think that you can certainly earn money and enjoy being a voice actor, even if you are isolated to a room. And that's something which I really love about this industry, is it does mean that it can be accessible. I know a few people who are voice actors who actually have physical disabilities, hidden disabilities, neurodiversities as well. I have ADHD myself, and I'm a jobbing actor in the voice acting industry. It is open to a lot of places, and there's a lot of opportunities to work for people in all walks of life. And that's part of what I love about it, is its accessibility in that way as well. So it can all be done, and it can all get there. But obviously, you're looking for jobs from different spaces, depending on where you're getting that work from. So where can I find work online? I put on here www.acting.skillshub.life. I'm really sorry, I probably shouldn't have said www. That's really old-fashioned. I feel very old. But you can, feel free to take photos. Mandy.com, Backstage.com, StarNow.com are all mid-range talent sites. The reason I call them mid-range is they're not going to cost you the 500 to multiple thousands that some of the big talent sites cost. If you've got that budget, then you can give those a whirl if you want to. But these ones are costing you roughly £100 per year to be on those talent sites. And it means that you can look for things like corporate gigs, some game gigs, animation gigs, that kind of stuff. I put castingcall.club down there as well. Castingcall.club is a free thing. You are sifting through things like fan dubs, fan projects, little indie stuff. But occasionally there's also paid roles on there. There's things like indie video game developers casting on there, audio dramas casting on there as well. You need to do a little bit of searching through to find stuff. But what's also interesting about castingcall.club is your auditions don't have to be, but people put them up and they are visible and listenable to everybody on the site, which means you can listen to other people's attempts at the role, their auditions, and you can go, right, which is good quality, which is lower quality, what's too quiet, what's too loud, and then you can listen to yours next to them and say, right, where am I fitting in this industry? How good's my audio? Is it as good as theirs, or is it better, or is it worse? And you can hear their takes on the character, and go, oh, okay, I didn't choose to do that, or I wouldn't have chosen to do that. Why have they chosen to do that? And it can give you an insight into what they're doing as well. Obviously, finding work. Social media. Social media is such a huge thing at the moment. I know loads of voice actors are a bit concerned about the death of Twitter. I refuse to call it X. And how much of a four-letter word hole that's become. And social media is so useful, and I put even LinkedIn on here as well because LinkedIn's a little bit of a sleeper. A lot of people don't bother looking on LinkedIn, but especially for things like corporate work and commercial work, so valuable, and that's missing money on the table. And maybe you're thinking, oh, I don't know if I want to do commercial work or corporate work. If it gives you money to continue to put into your work in order to do video games, it's worth doing. And compared to putting together a character for video games, like doing things like, recently did a dentist's call-in sort of, choose option 1 to reach a receptionist, that kind of stuff. It's paid money. I was very happy to receive it, and I had fun making it because it's absurd. But it's like that kind of job can keep you in the industry, It can keep you going when there's little dry periods between your hires and things, so it's really useful. Discord also, real sleeper. That some people just miss out on that. So many I run a Discord group myself where voice actors come together and create community. Again, in a job where we sit in padded rooms and talk to ourselves, it's so important to have that community. Peers that you can run things by and say, oh, I've been approached by this job. Does it seem like a scam to you? Or I'm really struggling to get this read down. Can you help me with it? And supporting each other and lifting each other up, like all ships rise together in that way. I even had, I was in a room the other day and somebody was trying to get a piece of copy down to 15 seconds, and it was a lot of words to fit in 15 seconds. And we managed to do it together. There was 4 of us working on it, and we managed to get it into 15 seconds, but still hit the emotional cues. Really cool stuff. So, thank you very, very much for coming. Don't clap yet, though. I will say I'm also going to be doing one-to-ones from 3 to 4 over there in a little bit. So if you've got like individual questions that you want to ask me, please feel free to come over. I'll chat to you about whatever. Either if you want advice on where you're going in the industry, or if you've got headphones, you want me to listen to something that you've done. I'm more than happy to do it that way as well. I'm also going to be doing a panel a little bit later on with Lauren Clare and Sean Mendham. Lauren Clare's done things like Spaceboat and stuff like that, and Lauren Clare's also done things like community management, works in the video game industry as well, so lots of cool knowledge there. Sean Mendham was recently in Baldur's Gate 3 as Scratch the dog, absolutely lovely human being, but was also in No Rest for the Wicked and stuff. We've been in a couple of games together, and I'm very pleased to know both of them. So the 3 of us will be up here answering any voice acting questions about the industry, our experiences, individual roles, whatever you want. So come back and hang out with us from 4:30 till 5:15 to do that as well. Will, do we have time to do a little bit of questions, or are we out of time? No. That's
not being a voice actor, I don't know how to speak or use a microphone. We could squeeze one, strictly speaking, we've ended, but as it's you. I mean, you are only doing a talk, a one-to-one and a panel, but even though you're being that lazy, go on, we can have a couple. If anyone wants to throw their hands up, you can tell me where to go, JD, including home.
That was a quick hand up.
Thank you for the chat. Brilliant. Quick note on show reels and courses. I do a lot of casting for video games. Beware the silver bullet course that costs a lot of money. And the second thing is your show reel. Beware the very, very, very expensive show reel. Do some research, put some good stuff on your show reel that you think is sellable, interesting to someone that casts for video games. Don't put a robot voice on there, please. And don't put that up front, because that's got no acting in it whatsoever. So, put some good acting on your show reel. But it was just a note about, beware, there are a lot of people out there that will probably try to charge you £2,000 or £3,000 for a show reel. Don't do that. Do your research. Find someone cheaper and do it yourself, especially if you've got your kit. And the course, beware. There's a lot of people that will try and shill you £2,000 or £3,000 for a silver bullet course to get you going in voice acting. Just beware that stuff.
100%. Yeah, show reels is again a talk I could do another whole talk on, but show reels is an important thing to only do when you're ready, and the reason you'll know you're ready is because you have someone that is trustworthy, who knows the industry well. Again, the reason I'm on things like Skills Hub is that you've got access to one-to-one coaching with things like casting directors, with jobbing voice actors who are going to give you proper advice on that kind of thing, who can coach you through your show reel to make sure that you're giving the best version of you, because your show reel needs to be you on your best day. And there are a lot of people out there who are going, oh, there's money in this, how can I siphon it off people? And who will do things like some slightly shifty courses, which is like, oh yeah, come and learn with me, and I'll just cram out a voice acting demo, and it won't be reflecting who you are, what your abilities are as a voice actor. It's something to take your time over, it's something to be careful about, it's something to research. Again, it could be a whole talk, but that's good advice. Thank you very much for contributing.